Welcome to another edition of the No Meat Athlete Academy, bringing you up close with experts in plant-based nutrition, fitness, and lifestyle to help you reach your goals.
So start by building a collection of recipes. That's where we are, and keep some sort of file somewhere, Evernote or a Google Doc or something that's easy, something in your phone, where you can very easily just add to this as you come across recipes that look like they would be good. So that's step one.
That's step one. And then you're going to sit down and you're going to make a chart for yourself, or you're going to download the templates that I gave you, passed on to you to give to everyone, and start putting some of these recipes into days of the week. And then you're also going to want to write down on those days, is there any prep that you need to do? So for example, if you're going to soak anything, if you're going to soak buckwheat or chickpeas or lentils or something, write down there in the morning that, after you brush your teeth and you go downstairs, you're going to put some chickpeas in a bowl with water before you go to work. That's it. So just write down little steps where there might be, some prep that you need to do in advance. And I've got a really good example of that on the template that I sent over too. So you'll see that like on Monday morning before you go to work, you'll soak some lentils, and then on Tuesday, then you're going to rinse them when you get home, put them in the fridge, don't deal with them until the next day when you make lentil tacos, So write down those little prep points. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have all your recipes, and you're going to create a shopping list for yourself and start adding up all of the ingredients that you need and the amounts, and get that ready to take to the store. And that's pretty much what you do. You're preparing. You get all of this stuff together. You take it to the store. You buy what you need. And what's awesome is that when you write these plans out and your shopping list out, you can keep them together in a file somewhere, so that maybe next week, if you're too busy to write out a meal plan, or a couple weeks down the line, you can go back to your library and grab the ones you've already created.
While you're saying broad concepts like make sure there's a lot of variety of color, we're talking about make sure there's a variety of maybe different nutrients. Like if you had a high-fat meal, make another one a low-fat meal.
Sure.
But it sounds like it's not too much more than that. I mean, as far as stressing over what's in each meal.
Yeah, I like to enjoy my day-to-day, and I think, stress is a big part of the problem when people are unhealthy. And if you're stressing out over meal planning, you're not enjoying life, and you're contributing to ill health. So I personally, when I pay attention to ratios and stuff too much, I don't enjoy it, and it doesn't necessarily work for me. I would much rather create a plan that's got the variety, more of the broad strokes, like you said, and see how I feel every day instead of paying attention to the numbers. So if I have a bad workout, I'd much rather figure out why I had the bad workout by paying attention to what I ate as a whole during the day versus a specific ratio.
Okay, so because, the other nice thing about, or maybe the only nice thing about not having ratios is that it's really simple and low stress and easy to start. So, like, if that does appeal to you, this idea of following this, like, Russian scientist diet where you're eating exact amounts of everything, like, just start with the really, really broad stuff and don't pay any attention to that at all. And then once you've gotten going with this and you've gotten a few weeks and it's working out, then you could say, like, you could start paying attention day by day if you really wanted, and say, like, okay, this next week, one day, I'm going to try to really stick exactly to these certain ratios. And then you could kind of treat it like a new habit just within the meal planning habit itself, if that was something that really appealed to you. But I think trying to jump right into that is going to lead to failure very often.
I do want to talk a little bit about how you can save time and prep for the meal planning. I have a bunch of tips for that process, which I think is important for writing some of these things down in the slots when you're talking about what you have to prep for each day. So let's see. Depending on how new you are to meal planning, again, make sure that you're only doing a couple days a week to plan. And then every week, something you want to consider is to try to get in the habit of soaking something. Soaking legumes and nuts and seeds is a great way to help make sure that you're assimilating all of the nutrients. And I know that a lot of people say they don't have time, so they're going to use canned chickpeas, for example, and that's okay. But it's nice to start practicing getting in the habit of soaking something. So at least once in the week, soak something. You can rinse it and then store them even uncooked in the fridge until you can get to them and cook them. Or you can soak them, and then when you go to bed at night, you can put them out in a bowl and put a little towel on top and go ahead and get some sprouts going. But try to do something that's a little more out of the box like that, and try to get that to become a new habit. And then you're going to want to make sure that you have some cooked ingredients on hand, like cook the chickpeas, cook lentils, cook some grains, buckwheat, rice, whatever, and just keep it in containers in the fridge, because in a pinch, you can always grab an onion and some garlic and some pepper and veggies and either saute it or marinate it and toss it all together in a bowl with the cooked grains already. And this is, I really like to keep seasoning mixes on hand for this reason. Like I always tend to have jerk seasoning or some kind of fixins for an Asian style sauce, taco seasoning, Montreal steak seasoning, something like that around. Because especially like this past couple months with writing the book, I've been too busy to come up with really creative meals for myself. But in an effort to get all that color and variety in, I just take all the veggies that I have in the fridge, toss them with cooked grains that I already have or chickpeas and the seasoning mixes, and you can put them in a wrap if you keep tortillas in the freezer. You can put them in a bowl. You can make them into a salad. You can add veggie stock and turn it into a soup. If you really just prep and keep all of these individual ingredients around, have the seasoning mixes, you can throw together meals really easily.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And one thing that I would add as far as the way to do that is like if you're making beans for something, or if you're making lentils, or if you're making rice or quinoa or whatever, just make more of it than you need, and then you'll have extra that you can put either in the refrigerator, or for longer term you can stick it in the freezer for the most part. Right.
You can put it in the fridge, or you can freeze it for later. A lot of times you can say that your produce is starting to go bad. You haven't gotten to it. You've got broccoli in there that's starting to look a little on the sad side. You can just cut it up into little pieces, put it on a cookie sheet, and put it in the freezer and let it freeze so it's in those individual pieces, and then you put them all together in a bag or container in the freezer so it's not like a broccoli football later.
Right.
Do that with chopped onions and, lemon juice, all kinds of stuff like that. I tend to keep a lot of those silicone ice cube trays in the freezer, and I'll freeze individual serving sizes of all kinds of things that make life easier. Like I'll take coconut oil and pack the cube with herbs like rosemary, sage, and thyme, and then fill it with coconut oil and freeze those, because you can then just toss those in a pan with vegetables and you have instant dinner in like 10 minutes.
Right.
I'll take chili and soups and freeze little squares of those too, because you can use them to top tacos or in salads or veggie bowls, and then start to think outside of the box too with that stuff. If it's flavorful and it's liquid, you can use it to dress a salad or a toss with veggies. Like a lot of times I'll make a huge salad and I'll just use salsa as the dressing,
that's great.
So just start thinking outside of the box. Soup, sometimes you can just melt down a couple cubes of soup that you've frozen and toss that with vegetables and some buckwheat or some rice, and it makes an awesome veggie bowl. I also always save scraps. Like whenever I'm prepping food in the kitchen, I keep a bowl near me that has a lid, and I toss all my veggie scraps in there, everything, even lemon peels and, the mushrooms and everything, and just keep that in there, freeze it. And then at some point in the week when you have an hour, boil it with water, strain it, and if you want it to have more body, you can blend a little bit of it and add it back in. But freeze that into individual cubes, and you've got veggie stock ready for cooking quinoa, buckwheat, whatever.
The one thing that I would add is that we also, if leafy greens, like if you have some spinach, and our problem is that we buy these massive quantities of these things in these big boxes, and they always, without fail, go bad. It just seems like no matter how fast we eat them, they go bad, unless you want to buy the tiny little servings, and then they're really expensive. But as soon as the spinach starts to look bad, we just throw it in the freezer, and then we use that for smoothies throughout the week. Just add a few handfuls of it in, and you don't taste it. But I love your tip about like taking a little bit of soup or chili and then using it not as leftover soup or chili, but as an ice cube sized portion that makes a taco better or something like that.
Yeah.
If you're cooking for a household of different diets, and I think the very obvious one that comes up most often, at least for me, people I talk to, is if someone wants to become vegetarian or vegan and their spouse or significant other or roommate or whoever that they do the cooking for doesn't want to do that.
Right.
So what do you do? And similarly, I mean, it might just be picky kids who don't like a certain ingredient. What's your approach to doing that, to cooking different ways for one person? Is it just kind of developing recipes that work really well for that?
Pretty much. You start from the most difficult scenario. And if you make that, if good food is good food. So if you make a really tasty recipe that everyone likes, then you can serve that and easily add animal products to that once you're getting close to wrapping up or halfway through, where you don't have to prepare all the different meals. Most of my meal plans, all of my meal plans consider this, and in the tips with each recipe, I offer up what animal proteins can be added, where you can add cheese or eggs if you want. But basically, at least with my recipes, I can speak to the fact that they all are tasty to start with, and then you prepare them. When you're like 90% done, you can add a pre-roasted chicken or some cheese on top, and then you're not having to create a bunch of different meals. As far as kids go, I know that palates are pretty set early, and I know for me, I was a picky eater because I never really tasted fresh food until I was in my 20s. So that's a little trickier to navigate, but I've found that a lot, my recipes, I test them on kids, I test them on the pickiest eaters, and make sure that before I post them, they're already yummy for everyone, no matter what.
Cool. Yeah, my tip for kids is to involve them as much as possible in the cooking process.
Absolutely.
I think a whole lot of it is kind of a fear thing, like it's just like an unknown thing on the plate that looks weird or has a strange texture, but like we have a 4-year-old, and if he helped my wife grow it in the garden,
right,
then all of a sudden the green bean becomes like an interesting thing to him, and it doesn't seem like this gross thing because he knew that they planted the seed and saw it happen. And similarly, like if we're making, I mean, he doesn't have much problem eating pasta, so it's not a great example. But if we make something like pasta or pizza dough and actually make it at home, and he helps roll it out and he sees it go into the pot, then he's just so much more excited about all of it. So I think the more and more you can involve kids in the process of the food, it just expands their horizons and what they're willing to try.
There are many ways to save money while making healthy purchases, and my favorite is the bulk section. Find a grocery store that has a bulk section. You can buy nuts, seeds, legumes, spices, grains, teas, all kinds of stuff in the bulk section. And because basically the more packaging a product has, the more expensive it is. And there are lots of online sources for these kind of items as well. And usually they're in huge volumes. So it's kind of fun to go in on a big order of almonds or something with a friend and then split it. And then that actually kind of creates more of a community sense around these changes that you're making as well. And then, when trying to decide whether you should buy organic, when you can save money by skipping the label, I would check out the Environmental Working Group's Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen list and print it out and keep it in your wallet. Take it with you when you go shopping, because it'll help you decide what produce and veggies contain the most pesticide residues and which don't. So when you can save money when you're doing that kind of stuff. Another thing that I really like is you can go onto Facebook and like your favorite brands, and then sign up on the websites for newsletters for your favorite brands, because a lot of times they send out discount coupons and let you know when there are specials or customer appreciation days or things like that. It helps quite a bit. And then as far as making these purchases last and go as far as possible, I have a lot of tips that I'd like to share to help make sure that everything that you're spending your money on, you get the most out of it.
Great.
One of my favorite tips is, when you buy berries and you get them home and in like 2 days they're totally moldy, mushy mess. If you get them home, the first thing you do, if you soak them in a bowl of water with maybe about 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar and let them soak in there for about, 3 to 5 minutes, and then drain them. And if you want, you can rinse them. I find that the the cider vinegar flavor doesn't stay on the berries. But if you're concerned about that, you can rinse them off. But just drain them, put them back in the fridge, and that will make them last for weeks. And they stay really plump and nice too. So, and then I tend to use a lot of lemons and citrus in my cooking. I just think that lemons and limes add a really nice level of flavor to most foods. So I have lots of peels. And what I'll do is I put them in a jar with white vinegar. I fill up a jar of white vinegar maybe halfway, and then I just keep stuffing the citrus peels in there. And after infusing for a while, it makes a really awesome kitchen, bathroom, and window cleaner. And it also doubles as a veggie wash. So you can transfer that, strain it out, transfer it to a spray bottle.
So when you say the peel, like, are you putting like if you had to say juice a lemon and you had to cut it in half and then you squeeze it and you just put that whole thing in there, or you
I
peel
put
it?
the whole thing in there.
Okay.
I put the whole thing in there. Yep. And
Great.
it just infuses in the oil. It's into the vinegar, and it's really awesome.
Great.
Another thing is I save all veggie scraps, pretty much all of them. And when I'm not putting lemon peels in the vinegar solution, I'm also putting those in with my veggie scraps, because you can freeze all of those scraps, and when you have time, boil up a big old pot of water with all those veggie scraps, and you've got veggie stock.
I mean, we talked about changing your diet as being a new habit, and if the whole way of eating is new to you, then that's one big habit to change. But the meal planning itself, as you're saying right here, and I hadn't even thought about this, but the actual act of doing the planning ahead of time, that in itself is a new habit that's got to be formed.
Absolutely. You don't want to resent this time that you're setting aside the meal plan. So enjoy it. If you can only enjoy it by filling out 2 columns, then that's it for you. If you're psyched and you want to fill out the entire week, then do that. But just listen to if you're feeling a little overwhelmed. Yeah.
And a few minutes ago, you mentioned the idea that some people just have the personality that wants to jump totally into something 100%. Like, you get inspired in the moment and you start thinking of all these ideas, and then it's like all you can think about. And you can do it happens with running, it can happen with diet, it can happen with anything else. You get into it and you think, okay, this is the new me. I'm changing everything right now. And I've come away from that recently. Like, just I've been convinced so much by this small steps approach, and I've seen so many examples of how well it can work if you actually restrain yourself to not put all the energy into something, so that there's this like really strong desire to come back to it. So like, if you're meal planning and you're really enjoying it, but you only do 2 days, by the time the next week rolls around, you're like so eager to get back to it again, because it was this small little bit and you left yourself craving more.
Right.
So like, I'm a big fan of that, but I've heard a lot of people, and I just totally recognize that some people they just can't get themselves to do that. So in those cases, if you really can't get yourself to take that small step approach, then what I recommend is just like jump all the way in. Go ahead and just do it all. Do the whole week of meal planning. Go for the full diet change if that's what you want to do and you want to make these major changes to your diet. But while you're doing that, also take a step back from the whole thing and say, this is my first attempt. This is my step 1 of the process. This isn't the end all be all. Like, if this approach fails, if this dive in all at once approach fails, then starting in, I don't know, on the second week, maybe 10 days from now, give yourself a reminder that says, is it working? And if it's not, then start again with the small step approach. To hear the rest of author Heather Crosby's meal planning and preparation tips for the busy athlete, plus a new interview with a plant-based fitness expert each month, visit www.nomeatathlete.com/academy.